We're here today looking again at leadership from the heart. What does it actually mean? Can you do it? Or should you, as a leader, always be using your head and seeing things objectively? We've all been there when, well, certainly as a woman, I think probably more than men, been told that we're being subjective and that we need to think clearly and all of that stuff. And I've got today with me the lovely Cathy Shuter or
Yeah,
Shutter?
Shooter, well done.
Shuter. Brilliant. So thank you very much, Cathy, for coming along today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
On here, we love to look at different people's stories, at different people's beliefs and hopes, and the way they live their lives. And what we're discovering is there's a lot more people out there who are heart centered and who get the value of stepping into the power of their heart first and allowing their heart to lead. And it's not to say that we don't need our heads to be practical at times, but if it's based on a heart message or on the desires of our heart, then generally speaking, we're much less likely to hurt people who fall in our paths. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Cathy, and the work that you do, first of all.
Great. Yes, about 10 years ago, I became a life coach and I decided that I had this dream. I sold my house, bought a caravan, and I did some self-publishing because I decided I always wanted to write a book. And in my coaching, I really caught on to what you were just saying there. I think when people are kind of head centered, if you like. They kind of do things, they give people goals, they have strategy, they like data, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But they also have very much focus on education and showing somebody else how to do it. Whereas when you're heart centered, I feel like what you do is you learn things and you share as you go along. And so you're not telling somebody how to do things because you can't really say how somebody else should do something. But what you can do when you're heart centered is kind of share what you've learned in the hope that it will benefit the other person or the other people. And I've been doing that for quite a few years. And since the pandemic, when everybody was isolated and we all had to stay at home, I started to realize how important it is for us to connect with people and to be with people. And at the time, we couldn't. So I created an online virtual well-being cafe on Facebook, and there was quite a few members, and we just exchanged that human connection, which I think is what it's all about. So we might be talking about something as simple as what we were cooking for our tea or what was nice about today, because at the time there was quite a lot of things that weren't nice and we were all quite worried about the future, etc. And just being in this little cafe, it was almost like you were in a real cafe. People could come in and say, oh, I've had a terrible day, and other people would cheer them up, and it just seemed like a lovely thing to do. And as I've been kind of learning my own personal development journey, I started to think, actually, wouldn't it be lovely to make this like face to face as well as virtual? And so I took kind of quite a bold decision in June last year to register Cathy's Wellbeing Club as a community interest company. And since then, we have had one or two face-to-face events. So we're actually trying to create a kind of real sense of community that starts off virtually, because we've got people in different countries and definitely different counties. But actually, we are trying to run some events where people can meet face to face as well. And that's kind of where we're at now.
It's lovely to hear you talking like that because I think during lockdown, I think a lot of us discovered the virtual world in a new way, first of all, because we hadn't really been used to it before that. Zoom has clearly made a massive profit out of all of it. But the truth is, the world became a smaller place because we actually then began to connect with people all over the place. Like you say, I mean, I've got people literally all over the world. I never would have met them. They never would have been part of my life. And I'm glad that they are, as well as you say, across the country. But having that face to face contact as well feels like the icing on the cake because it feels like there's something different when you're in the room with somebody. There's a different kind of connection, isn't there?
I agree. And I think if you've got like, if you imagine a local community with their local cafe, and you go in and people know who you are. So they might even say, "Oh, do you want your usual?" And it's a lovely thing. And then you sit down, somebody else comes in. They might not be your best friend and you might not agree with them politically, but actually in that cafe, you all just get along. You're like, "Oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm not so good. So and so's ill. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And it's that kind of connection that I think you can't always get quite the same virtually. I think we've
Mm.
made a really good effort, and I agree. I think there are opportunities now. Now we've discovered we can use Zoom and other platforms to connect. And in fact, some of the like big personal development gurus have offered quite a lot of free content using Zoom and things. So I'm not dismissing it, but there's just something missing, that human kind of connection. And I think a lot of people are starting to kind of miss that. And it's strange because we were all kind of told to stay home and we stayed home. And quite a lot of people, when they were told they could go out again, have kind of changed their habits and aren't
Mm.
going out so much. And I know that there have been lots of cafes and pubs and similar venues that have closed down and they haven't managed to really open since the pandemic. And I just think that's a massive shame because it's almost saying at the moment, if you wanted to, you could nip down to your local cafe and you know it's there. And one day that might not be the case. And
Mm.
that is the thing that I don't want to lose. I feel like
Mm.
communities offer each other so much. And in fact, we've got like our ultimate aim for our CIC is to have a well-being cafe by the sea somewhere in the UK with a little animal sanctuary, an opportunity to do some coaching, a place for artists, a place for musicians. Local people could come and sell their wares. You know, you could have maybe an organic little allotment nearby. You could have a camping space, that kind of thing. And that's obviously the ultimate aim. But what we'd worked out was that you can do these things through different strands. And I've had to write these down because I don't remember all seven of them. We call them the seven C's, which is kind of linking with our dream of being by the sea. And so establishing the true sense of community through the seven C's of collaboration, and that is really collaborating with like-minded people and
Mm.
all sorts of projects. Cooperation, which kind of links with collaboration. Coaching, because I think that's a really important part of what we could offer. And we do offer, I have my own Facebook Trusty Life Coaching, and I do some coaching privately via that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got communication and all the different ways we can communicate. Celebration, which is a massively important part of life. Compassion, which is again a massively important part of life, and creativity. And creativity is very broad because it can be creative as in writing, creating art, craft, but also creative thinking, finding creative solutions to things. And I
Mm.
do think heart-centered people are pretty good at being creative as well.
Yes, often they tend to give themselves time to create. It's just how they think and how they work, how they speak. I was talking to my husband yesterday. With me, colours are very, very important. And I think that's more likely to be the case if you're heart-centered, actually, and you feel the emotions a bit more powerfully, I think. So I know we've had a conversation before, and all those C's is an article I wrote on LinkedIn with a lot of those C's in it. And the sense of community, that's always been at the heart of the business Succeed from the start. It's always been based on community. How can we help each other? How can we support each other? How can we help each other to rise, to grow, to develop, to reach the right people, and so on? Because that's the truth of it, is we need other people.
Mm.
We aren't islands. And the solopreneur, which you've probably come into contact with a lot, and I certainly have, can spend so much time, I should say, on their own, trying to do what they're doing, usually with a big passion, if they're heart-centered. Because the difference for me between the head and the heart is that the head-centered person will see a gap in the market and will try to fill it. They'll look for a way that they can earn a living through filling the gap in the market. The heart-centered person entrepreneur will see the gap in somebody's life and see how they can find a way to fulfill it and to heal it. And that's the huge difference for me. But it's still perfectly possible to run a successful business. It's just that you have to approach it in a different way. But it sounds like you're giving people an opportunity to be able to do that. I loved what you said also. I wanted to go back to that about the learning side of it, rather than learning it and passing on information and then saying, off you go then. You know, you've got all the information now, you can go and sort of sort it all out yourself. That method of learning, and not necessarily learning all you need in one go, learning as you go, but then taking people alongside you, helping them to grow with you, sharing what you've learned, which might not be perfect yet, but you know it's going to help them. There's going to be progress made. And then walking alongside them. And if they stumble and fall, you're there to pick them up. It's not a case of, oh, well, just let them drop through the cracks, because that's what I've seen happen to so many people who are heart-centered. They've followed the wrong person, and that person has let them drop through the cracks and then walked away. I think if you're heart-centered, you're never going to do that.
No, I completely agree. And I think also it's quite a bold statement to present yourself as the expert on anything. It's almost implying there is one way of doing it and it's my way of doing it. And if you don't follow it exactly, it's because you haven't done it properly. And that really isn't the way we learn. And in fact, there isn't a kind of one fix all way of approaching anything. And so what I've kind of done, literally, I've got several, as I said, I self-publish my books and they're definitely not the world's best produced. But so, for example, this one here, 365 free ways to more accepting days. Have a guess what I was learning about when I wrote that book. I was basically learning about acceptance. And so as I worked my way through, and I kind of wrote loads down in my diary, and then I pulled stuff together and I thought, right, what things are there that I've learned that really helped me? And what is a way to put that out and support other people? Probably even more than with my coaching, because you can get the ebook on any of these for about, I don't know, $1.99. And then you can download it and you've got all the different tips. And what you do, it's more or less like a toolbox that people can try. You're not saying this will work. You're saying give it a go and see what happens. And in fact, in April, I've been sort of since I'm jumping a bit here. In December, I started working out what I called an evidence journal. And I've been writing down my kind of findings for different things that I've tried out, like the gratitude, 21 days, gratitude practice, 21 days, forgiveness, you name it, different things. And what I suddenly thought was, wouldn't it be great to get a group of people having a go at the same thing? So I wrote down, I've tried lots of different things and I've made some suggestions that in April, it's going to be called the 21-day abundance experiment. And anyone who wants to join in, it doesn't cost anything, but just choose one of the methods and give it a go for 21 days. And if they're kind, they'll put into my comments how they're getting on. And I can anonymize that, add it to my journal, and write a book about effective ways to feel more abundant in your life. And it's just, that's an example of how you can learn some stuff. You can ask other people how it went. You can kind of road test it all. And then when you find out, especially in groups, I find if, say, I don't know, 8 people tried an experiment and it really worked on all 8 of them, that is so much more powerful than, oh, it worked for me, because the 8 people have all got different experiences, different backgrounds. And if the approaches really work for all 8 people, then that's really exciting. And you can think, oh, actually, maybe I could try that. And I think that's really the way I like to work is I might say to someone, they might come up to me and say, oh, I've got this issue. And I very much believe they've actually got the solutions. And it's often through questioning that they can actually, when they respond, they find out, oh, yeah, actually, I could try that. And once they're kind of clear on what it is they want to change, they've got an idea of something they'd like to try in order to change it, then you as a coach, you just show up to ask them how they're getting on, you know? And quite often, once they're kind of, I suppose they're back on track where they want to be, they don't really need you anymore because they had the idea in the first place. It's like, just sometimes we get a bit stuck and sometimes we don't like to ask for help. And I think
Yeah.
that's where, through writing and coaching, I've learnt that myself the hard way. And I'm kind of gradually learning to ask for help when I need it. But then equally, I can be the help when somebody else needs it. And like you said,
Mm.
you can't sort of start working with someone, they then fall through the cracks and you just leave them there. That's just simply not fair. And it's really not what life's all about.
It certainly shouldn't be, should it? And I think the best person, if you're working with somebody and they don't need you anymore, you've done a good job, haven't you, actually? That's really
That's
what,
true.
as a coach, that's what we should be looking for. We should be looking for to help people get on their feet, go off and do whatever it is. And often it's about asking the right questions. There's some listening that goes on, of course there is, but it's about moving forward from that place. And I think I'm never going to say that nobody should need a counsellor, not at all, because there's a whole purpose in the sort of listening part. Sometimes
Mm.
people need a long time to actually listen, to be listened to. And I think what I've seen often is that that person then doesn't know how to stop. So I actually saw a counsellor, a lovely lady, when my sister died. She sadly took her own life about 20 years
Oh,
ago now, but I went to see somebody to get some help. And the problem was that when I actually something happened in my life, I discovered the power of forgiveness. I was able to forgive the anger I was holding inside of myself. So there's a bit of an experience I had myself when I lost my sister. She took her own life in 2003, which of course was a very distressing time for all of us. And I needed some support, I needed some help. And so I went to a counsellor and do nothing. I'm not saying anything against this lady, because she was a lovely lady. But halfway through the process, I found that I could forgive my sister. And it was such a powerful experience that I knew healing had taken place. Now, it wasn't that suddenly I didn't miss her or anything like that, but I knew the journey with this lady had stopped. I'd found what I needed. She'd helped me towards that place. And it was amazing. I could stand up taller and so on. And I went to speak to her and explain this to her, thinking she would be as delighted as me. And then she wasn't. Her sort of attitude was, that can't be right. We've only seen you three times. It can't possibly be right. We need to go through this process and we need to follow this plan and we need to do this and that and the other. And I was sitting there thinking, no, I know that I'm okay. And she couldn't accept that. And I realized that she needed me more than I needed her, that this was part of her journey into whatever it was she was exploring. Well, nowadays, as a coach, I mean, I'm a business coach, but sometimes you do find yourself in other situations. Knowing that you've brought somebody to the place where they are now running on their own, that for me is hugely powerful. It's very releasing, makes you feel like you've done a really good job. So it sounds like you've had that sort of experience too.
absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the way I tend to coach is very solution focused. And I agree with what you said earlier. There's definitely a place for more extended counselling because I think some people have got all sorts of stuck patterns and things that maybe started years and years ago. And perhaps they need to make those connections through a lot of conversation in order to get to that place, in your case, of forgiveness. But actually, for some people, just by starting to unpack how they're feeling and releasing that emotion, that's all they need to do. And I think this is where it's quite hard to have a set package. If you
Mm.
kind of book a package, it's kind of, it needs to be suitably open ended because some people need more and some people need less, you know. And I mean, obviously, I guess sometimes we think we're over something. We're going, all right now. And that might be one layer. But then what would happen in that scenario is you'd realize that given time. And then you'd go back. You go, oh, yeah, you were absolutely right. I hadn't really forgiven. I do need to explore more, but you need to go and try first, I feel.
Yeah, yes. I mean, and 3 years later, I lost my brother to a brain tumor, and he was my
Yeah.
soulmate. And that was a terrible time. And with his death, because he wasn't ready to die, he had so much left to give, and it was so sort of sudden and shocking. And this time I used Cruise, bereavement counselling. And that was really interesting because we had plenty of time. I needed much longer. And I reached a place of peace, if you like, not of complete healing, but of peace. And then I decided I thought I wanted to give back to them and sort of maybe support other people. So I went through their process of exploring that. And what happened was, as they talked to me, they recognized that there was still a journey to go on and offered me some more time. And I was so grateful for them because I wasn't, there were things. And as you say, at that point, originally, I probably didn't recognize them, but a little bit later on, I found that was hugely helpful to me. And like you say, you'll see these deals out there. One coaching session is this much money, and 6 is this much. And it's a lot cheaper. So you can think, well, I better buy that one because I don't know how much I need. But you do have to be a bit open-ended and maybe say, as the coach, say, at the moment, I think I'm excited about where you've got to. And then potentially either just leave the door open and say, you've got these 3 sessions, which you can use at any time, or potentially decide to, I don't know, treat them in some way. Maybe you send them for a massage or something. But I think the heart-centered person is probably able to recognize that more quickly.
Absolutely. And I think given time, they would, let's say they had got a business in some area like counselling or something similar, they would evolve those kind of open systems because they would realize they've tried. Maybe they had the training and the training said, oh, you need to have 10 sessions and it's going to cost such and such. So, of course, initially you'd offer that. And then it's about being flexible and responding to feedback, which, again, if you're heart centered, you're willing to do because you're learning all the time. And so you'd be like, oh, okay, maybe I can't be quite so rigid on this package that I offer. And actually, I liked what you said. You could have a package, you could have 6 sessions, but they could be within, I don't know, 6 weeks or 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have that flexibility, couldn't you? I think, I mean, when you're running a business, obviously there does need to be some practicalities that you've got to explore. Potentially you've got rent to pay, or for me, I've got VA to pay and so on. So I can't just have no money coming in and just say, oh, never mind, you're all fine. There's got to be this kind of practical head on your shoulders, but I think it's guided in a different way. It's the purpose behind what you're doing and why you're doing it that seems to make a huge difference and send you home at the end of the day with there's a deeper sense of fulfillment at the bottom, even if potentially that week perhaps you didn't make as much you thought you were going to make. Maybe it's a bit tight that week, but that's okay because actually you achieved in a different way. And I do think that when you start relying on your heart to lead you, when it brings you to the right people, when it opens up the door for the right people to find you, then actually the business will grow anyway.
And it's also more exciting, let's face it. It is because you can actually go along, you can, I don't know, go to the shop, get chatting to someone. Then there's some incredible thing that you've got in common that you didn't know if you hadn't been talking. And then they'd be like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. And before you know it, you're on some kind of shared project, and these kind of things happen all the time if you remain kind of open to communicating with other people and learning from them.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been on a call with a lady in America, and we couldn't meet. It's probably about a month, I think, since she reached out to me. And then within half an hour, we've been laughing, talking about our shared experiences, and she's finishing the call with, what can we do next? And let's do an interview or whatever. And you're coming up with ideas. It's going to help both of you because you were open enough to take the time out. She wasn't necessarily the person that I would normally have reached out to. She reached out to me, and I think there's definitely going to be something coming out of it for both of us. So
no, that's great. I think that's when people network, that is the best possible outcome. There's absolutely nothing wrong with people kind of adding each other, and some people will have more of a connection than others. But I think what's great is if something comes up and several people believe in that thing or have the same concern, it makes sense to do things as a collaboration. It really does, because it just means you're not reinventing the wheel. I really learned that with doing this wellbeing club. It's like, oh, there are other wellbeing clubs around. Makes sense to contact with them, find out how they're getting on. I've learned some valuable lessons where people have I don't know, maybe invested lots of their own money into something and then ending up like losing lots of money. And you're kind of learning and listening to other people. You're like, oh, okay, I won't do that then. So you're kind of working out what to do as well as what not to do if
Yeah.
people are willing to share their experiences.
And most people are, aren't they? I think you only have to ask the question, because most people will happily talk about themselves or their business or their family. If you give them an opening, you've got to want to listen to the answers. And we're not, I think, that good at listening, or a lot of people, they don't realize the power of listening. I think it's probably one of the biggest gifts that you can give to another person is to actually listen, hear them, hear their story, find out the difficulties, find out the joys, and then move forward together if that's right. But just opening, like you're asking the questions and then you're learning valuable things, and I'm sure that you're teaching something, you're giving something in return as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the ways I mostly pass on what I learn is through my writing. Because I write a lot. I just literally I come up with, I don't know, I'll learn something. Like I said, the other one was acceptance, it might be gratitude, could be anything. And I'll be kind of exploring it, going on webinars, reading about it, trying things out, working out what works for me, working out what maybe works for other people, and then just writing about it and then sharing it. And it's, I mean, the lovely thing about self-publishing, it's so low cost. If somebody decides they want your ebook, it doesn't cost, it's pennies for Amazon to produce. So therefore, because what they do when you self-publish, they tell you the minimum that you can charge for your item that covers their costs. So if you're having like a paperback, there's obviously printing costs and there's postage costs, that kind of thing. So there's a sort of minimum that you could charge. But it's like if you have an ebook, you can charge pennies and still make a tiny profit, but actually get your book out to so many people. And that can be your way of giving back for all the things that you've learned from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. And so if you're watching this on recording, then Cathy's going to come along and talk to us a little bit more about self-publishing. So perhaps we can share the link to that session as well so that you can get a little bit of insight. But Cathy, tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you. And that's also not just online, but also in person, if you're getting in front of people in face to face as well. Tell us a little bit about that too.
I think probably the best thing to do would be like if you're interested in the well-being club kind of area of things, I have got a website, but it's really basic. It's basically Cathy's Wellbeing Club.co.uk. But I've got on Facebook, I've got my coaching, which is Trusty Life Coaching. My name is Cathy Shuter, Shuter. You can look me up and add me as a friend on my personal page if you'd like to. But also you can find my Cathy's Wellbeing Cafe, which is where most of the communication about the Wellbeing Club takes place. I have also got a Substack. What I'll do after this call, I'll just email you it all so that you've got all the links. But the Substack, I really like. Have you had much experience of Substack?
I haven't,
It's
no.
okay. I did a book where I did buy a book program, and this guy was called Matt Rudinsky, something like that. And I did a book under his kind of guidance because I'm not very good at marketing, and he was quite good at that sort of thing. So I did the book under that, had it published under his, I think it was called Platypus Press or something similar. And the absolute gold that I got from that course was how Substack, you can do any writer, you can write on Substack for free. You've got this thing called Notes, which is just basically you write a little short post, or you can write a long form post, like a whole blog. And anyone that subscribes, basically, they keep the email list. You don't have to keep all their email information. And you can just click send, and everybody on your mailing list will get your latest blog. And so that's a really good way of communicating because I can update information on there and it goes to everybody's email. So that might be another thing people are interested in, is maybe signing up to my Substack, which again, I'll send you the link and you can add that to the other stuff.
Yeah, and put it out there. So if you're watching us on recording, you may have your thoughts as well about anything that we've said, or you may have a different opinion about what leading from the heart means, or maybe a story to tell. Maybe there's been time in your life when you've done exactly what I did, or something similar, where you've actually found yourself following those who are leading from the head and realized that you've stepped deeply into something that just does not feel good, but you don't know how to get out of it. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to share your story. We'd love to get your voice out there and heard, because there are people in this world whose lives need help to change them. They're looking for help. They're looking for support. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're actually in that place and you would love to talk to Cathy or to myself. Do get in touch. Do talk. Do share. Do pass this video on. And yeah, allow yourself to touch your own heart, because when you do that, your heart will touch others. And there's nothing that brings greater joy, in my experience. Thanks, Cathy, for coming along today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you very much for offering me this opportunity.